The following program does not necessarily reflect the opinions and viewpoints of the staff and management of the station.
Welcome to the wonderful world of seniors, the best of all worlds. You now have the time, resources, and ability to enjoy what you have worked for all your life. So let's explore the many possibilities available to seniors on Senior World Radio. Senior World Radio is your source for senior citizens-related topics, information, and entertainment. Now, here is your host of Senior World Radio, Glenn Howard.
Thanks so much for joining me. I have a very special guest here, Mr. Ed Vezey. Ed was with us here a few weeks ago. We've had a lot of interesting response to it because Ed is a survivor of Pearl Harbor. He was aboard the USS Oklahoma when it went down December the 7th, 1941. 73 years ago, the Imperial Japanese Navy made a surprise military attack on the United States Naval Base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. And Ed Vezey remembers that well because he was there serving in the USS Oklahoma. Ed, I so much enjoyed that visit we had here a few weeks ago, and so glad you could come back and we can continue our discussion a little bit more, talking about what happened 73 years ago.
73 years ago next month.
In Pearl Harbor.
A couple of months.
You were talking about your activities in that last show. Start out again, basically talk about when you first heard something was different. You had been, as I understood, you had already served for a short time on the U.S. Arkansas, was it?
Yes.
And then had been transferred to Hawaii, where you were assigned to the USS Oklahoma.
Well, there was 3 months of intensive school between the Arkansas cruise and the being commissioned as an officer in the Naval Reserve. And I wound up on the Oklahoma at Pearl Harbor in April of 1941. And we wound up at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, and that terminated my tour of duty aboard the Oklahoma.
And a sad way to have to terminate it, for sure.
The last time we were talking about the fact that I reached the Maryland with exactly zero identity.
I remember you talking about that, losing your shorts, your shirt, your watch, everything, and they drug you aboard, was it the Missouri?
Yep, it's gone. Anyway, it was a pretty difficult time.
Yeah.
I don't want to even try to recapture that feeling because it's not a good feeling, and I don't go back there and try to explore the feelings.
The movie about Pearl Harbor, how close was that to reality? Was that anything like your remembrance of it?
Well, Toro Toro was a little closer to it. They used a lot of real tape. The movie Pearl Harbor was a movie, I guess what you would expect Hollywood to produce. Did a few silly things like one scene shows a bunch of sailors in white uniform clamoring to get aboard up the side of the Oklahoma that sank, and there wasn't anybody in white uniforms, and nobody was clamoring aboard, believe me. At that point, it was pretty well abandoned.
Pretty brutal.
As far as me personally concerned, the feelings are still very intense when I go back out there. Tears of an anger that you can't possibly conceive of well up, particularly when I go aboard the Arizona and see the names of some of my friends that were aboard there. It brings it all back in vivid reality. And but on that particular day, there was no time for sitting around and developing beautifully phrased words to describe what went on. Captain of the Maryland passed the word, says, if there are any survivors of the Oklahoma who would be willing to take one of my boats and go get ammunition, we were sure would like that. So I rounded up a crew of people, and we took one of their boats and went to the ammunition depot. The sub-depot is it's down in Westlock, which is maybe 10 or 12 miles down the harbor towards the sea. And we got over there, and there was no one there. There was an ammunition ship there. The Japanese dropped one bomb on it. It hit the dock and blew a hole in the dock. If it hit that ship, that whole corner of Pearl Harbor, the island would have been obliterated, but they missed, which a lot of people were very thankful. We got there and there's no one there, so we broke the locks on the magazines, loaded up his boat, Maryland's boat, and then we stayed there as a working party. No uniforms, no nothing. It's rather interesting. The next step in that sequel, after 3 or 4 days, I was not very good company for anybody, and the scrap of clothing somebody's given me on December 7th. And finally, the executive officer, who was dressed in his pretty whites and had his car and everything, said, "Vezey, I'm going into town. Come on, let's see if we can get you some clothes." The Navy had cut off my credit. "Who are you? You got no ID." Thank you. We went in town, and there was an old chief passage officer in there that ran a complete Navy supply store. I knew him quite well. I'd bought stuff from him. I went with my executive officer to him, and I said, "Chief, what you see is all there is. I have no shoes. I have no underwear. I have no soap, obviously." I said, "I need whatever you'll give me." He says, "Sailor, the store is yours. Take everything you want. Pay me when you can, if you ever can." I'll tell you, it brings tears to this day.
Yeah.
He completely re-equipped me from cap to shoes and everything between, and several changes of everything.
The brotherhood of a fellow Navy officer was very strong.
That still strikes me as he was willing to know full well he might never even get a dime from me.
Right.
I might be dead the next day, but he had no restraint whatsoever. I just still can't get over being grateful for that.
I think that's the nature of the American fighting man.
I think that's
because when we go out, they know it's everything's in.
Yeah, I think. Well, you realize how raw life is.
Yeah.
And how minimum claim any of us have on life, and how little claim we have on this world's material goods. And it becomes one of survival. Survival is a mode you can't understand until you've gone through it, I think. So they try to call us heroes for being survivors. I said, no, we joined the Navy because we wanted to. We weren't any great patriotic guys looking for some place to get killed for the country.
And I've heard you use the expression, "You're not a hero, you're a survivor."
What's that?
I've heard you use the expression, "You're not a hero, you're a survivor."
Absolutely, and surviving has a few tricks of its own, believe me. Anyway, I wound up getting sent up to the main ammunition depot up in the hills at Little O'Day. Way long in September, finally I asked the executive officer, could I take a day off and go into Pearl on one of the ammunition trucks? I guess so, but don't tell the old man.
Okay.
So I went in. Well, being young and brash, I immediately went to the personnel office in Pearl. I said, "When are you going to send me back to sea? You've sent what few survivors there were. I lost essentially all my friends. The junior officers were pretty well wiped out." And as in Pearl officer personnel, people said, "Who are you?" And I told them, they said, "We have no record that you ever existed." I said, "Thanks a big bunch. How have I been paid?" I said, "Have no idea. I've been paid, and doctors have taken care of me." And they said, "Well, we'll see about that." I got back to base that night, and the word was, "The captain will see you immediately upon your return." I hate to use the expression on the radio, but there's no way to describe except to say he was tear-ass. He was furious. "So you want to go back to sea, do you? You're going to go and you're going to hate it." I mean, he was mad. He had me put on the worst little tramp steamer Navy ever put the flag on. And I went immediately west. And we became a station ship in Guadalcanal, the harbor across the road. And that was 6 or 8 months I'd just soon forget.
Yeah.
But
how long was it between the time that the Pearl Harbor incident happened and you were back in the continental 48 with your foot on American soil?
Well, how I got out of Guadalcanal was easier. The ship's captain was crazy, and he and I became the very best of friends. He couldn't stand the sight of me. It was mutual. That was bad duty. But I won't even go into the details. But I spent some time on Guadalcanal, and I got back to the ship. I told the doctor, I said, I don't feel so good. He said, what are the symptoms? I said, I don't have any symptoms. I just feel lousy. No symptoms at all. I said, well, I got a little diarrhea. Uh-oh, he says. Well, I picked up amoebic dysentery on Guadalcanal, and there was no cure in those days. I don't know whether there is now or not. But I lost about 20 pounds in the next week. And the doctor says, this is your ticket off of this miserable tub. I got the screwiest orders you ever saw. To destination unknown. Go find a hospital.
I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio, visiting today with Ed Vezey. Ed is a survivor of the U.S. Oklahoma, a 94-year-old youngster who goes back to Pearl Harbor quite frequently. In fact, as soon as we have a break, we're going to come back and talk to him a little bit more about that. Ed, this is so exciting visiting with you. I'm just looking forward to continuing it. We're going to be right back, so please don't go away.
You're nobody till somebody loves you. You're no.
Have you ever had a problem, but it seemed like there was no one who could help? You spent hours calling around, being referred from one place to the next. Well, not anymore. I want to tell you about a free and easy-to-use service in Oklahoma. 211 is a simple 3-digit phone number to get help or to give help when you don't know where to turn. Dialing 211 only takes a minute, and you are connected with a caring Oklahoman who will help you find the assistance you've been looking for. With access to over 13,000 programs, Heartline 211 can connect you to local resources for many different needs, including health care, food, counseling, rent assistance, disability assistance, job services, and much more. 211 is a service of Heartline, a United Way partner agency. 211, the right first call to get help or give help 24 hours a day.
Hi, my name's Jason Ledlow, president of UT Phone, the ultimate telephone service. We're proud to be a sponsor of Senior World Radio with Glenn Howard. UT Phone is dedicated to providing Oklahomans affordable telephone service all across our great state. We have Lifeline Home Phone service starting at just $1.95. That's right, just $1.95, and most of Oklahoma's seniors qualify for this reduced home phone service. They get to keep their old home phone number, and it even includes long distance. Another great feature of UT Phone's customers really like is that it includes repair service. That's right, any repairs at no additional charge. With many telephone services charging $40 to $50 per month, it makes sense to switch your service to UT Phone. This service is a federal program that is provided through the Universal Service Fund. There is only one per household, so make it UT Phone's home phone service for $1.95. Give us a call at 800-996-0098. Again, call 800-996-0098.
I've made up my mind.
Welcome back to Senior World Radio. I'm Glenn Howard, visiting today with Ed Vezey. Ed is a 94-year-old survivor of the USS Oklahoma. For the last 15 minutes, we've been talking about his experiences on the Oklahoma, the whole Pearl Harbor event. And we're going to get into just a few minutes talking about his going back over there several times. But just before we took a break, Ed, you were talking about getting a medical release, sending you back to a hospital in the United States. Keep going with your story.
It was about a month in the hospital, and finally they said, well, we can't do any more for you. You're still running a fever, but we can't do anything, so you better go back to sea. So I went into the local office. I found the hospital in New Caledonia, by the way, that free French place that didn't like us 1 hour. But they tolerated us because we had money.
Right.
Anyway, when I got into the office over there, they just said, hey, there's a merchant ship in the harbor. The third mate fell down the hatch, and they would ask for 2 naval officers to navigate them back to the States. I said, that sounded like a fun duty to me. So another officer and I showed up at the ship just as they pulled in the accommodation ladder. And dinner that night, the captain said, what are you guys doing on my ship? I said, well, we understand you need a couple of guys to navigate you back to the States. Well, no, he says, I don't, and I'm not going back to the States.
Okay.
Whoa, he said, I'm going to New Zealand, then I'm going back to Guadalcanal, and I don't know where I'm going from there. But when we got to New Zealand, we went to the naval base there, and they said, just get him to put a note on there that you were on this ship and that you were good boys. And I wound up back in the States and got put on a wonderful ship, Admiral Turner's flagship. And I was his ship's gunnery officer, and went through the Marshall Islands, the Marianas Islands, the Philippines invasion. It was great duty, and he was a miserable guy to work for, but he was very, very good at what he did, and it was a joy to get cussed out by him because you could get that done real easily. Anyway, we're back to what's still going on today.
Yeah.
There, last year.
When did you first start going back to when was the first time you went back to Pearl Harbor after 1941?
Well, we put in there several times with different ships. So to say, well, when you went back is
right.
Pearl Harbor was no great thrill as a place to go. But
how much longer were you in the Navy after Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, that was in the Navy. I was there when I got put aboard that miserable little tramp steamer.
All right.
And then on the way back to the States, on the ship that I got transportation on, we put in at Pearl. And then we got back to the States. I made the mistake of giving them my leave address, and 30 days of leave turned to 15 minutes report immediately. And I had to pay my own way to New York to pick up a new ship. That was the Admiral Turner's flagship.
Once you got out of the Navy and became a civilian again, what got you interested in trying to go back to Pearl Harbor again as a civilian?
Well, to tell you the truth, I didn't have any interest in going back to Pearl Harbor. I wanted that memory to just be gone. And it wasn't until many years later, there was a group of Pearl Harbor survivors, but I didn't particularly like what they were doing and how they were doing it. But then I heard school kids were answering the question, what is Pearl Harbor? With answers like, oh, well, that's probably where the bunch of protesters got mad at the British and threw the tea in the harbor or something. I said, whoops, better get out there and start waving the flag. So
yeah.
I joined the group that was meeting at the time. And actually about that time, Paul Goodyear and one of the local senators, Senator Jim Reynolds, got started building a memorial to the Oklahoma. And there's quite a team was put together. Admiral Greg Slavonic retired, and a banker named Tucker McHugh became co-chairman of that committee. And boy, we worked like crazy, but it took the better part of 6 or 7 years, I've forgotten just how long, to get the memorial designed. There was a lot of free time from wonderful people designing and building that thing.
And now, where's that located?
That's located at Pearl Harbor on Fort Island, within about 100 yards of where the ship was sunk.
Okay.
Perfect location. Missouri is anchored in the anchorage where we are. I should say the mooring where we were sunk.
Well, now, part of the U.S. Oklahoma was brought back here to Oklahoma City, wasn't it?
No, the part of the mast was brought back to the States.
Okay.
Actually flown back by the Air Guard, and it's up at Muskogee at their war memorial up there.
I see.
It's part of their display. I go up every year in their summer fundraiser and spend the day with them and try to encourage people to think that, well, they're doing a great job of memorializing. They have a whole submarine up there, for crying out loud. You can go through that submarine. I get claustrophobia just looking at it.
So you started taking groups or arranging for groups to go back over to Pearl Harbor.
So,
tell me about
well,
that.
What happened was, first there was a group that went back and broke ground for the memorial. I didn't go with that group for some reasons that I don't want to talk about it here. But then the next year we dedicated the new memorial on December 7th. And I mean, the the little company up there in eastern Oklahoma that built that thing, they worked their heads off to meet at the date. And the president of the company was there polishing pylons the day that the thing was dedicated. But I've been going back every year since, and there's been some of us every year have gotten together at that time. And now, what semblance we had left of a reunion, probably the last one was last year. There were 3 of us actual survivors and another fellow who had just been transferred off a week before and sat on another ship and watched us get sunk. So there were 4 of us here last year. The leader of the group, Paul Goodyear, died in June. I'm going back in November with his widow to place his ashes in the Punch Bowl Cemetery in Honolulu. If you haven't been there, it's one of the places you must visit when you go to the islands. I can't go there without tears, really. Even the local people tell me that it had no association with Oklahoma. It is so beautiful and so serene and such a wonderful final resting place for an old sailor that you can't go there without tears. You just can't do it. So,
Ed, when you talk, you mentioned earlier about kids not knowing anything about Pearl Harbor. You know, that's been, I think, a real shock to all of we old-timers. I talking to a young lady a while back, said something about the Berlin Wall, and she had no idea what the Berlin Wall was or no idea what's going on. As you talk to kids today and you tell them the story about Pearl Harbor, what kind of response are you getting?
You know, because of the movie Pearl Harbor, which was a very popular movie, I found a tremendous curiosity. I've talked to a good many groups in the area, to the 2 of the 3, I guess, that really stand out was a Air National Guard group, recruits, an Navy OCS group, young fellows volunteering to be officers in the Navy. They were quite a similar pair of groups, whatever that is. They were very responsive. And then I talked to a group of 3rd and 4th graders out in the Mustang. And those kids, they hung on every word I said. They wanted to know all about it. It's just very encouraging. They know about Pearl Harbor, and of course, being from Oklahoma City, they know about the Oklahoma, so it's been very encouraging. I don't know how much time we have left, but there's one thing I want to bring up. You always get a lot of questions.
Right.
When I talk to the Air National Guard group, the final question really stumped me. Is one young fellow says, "Any regrets?" Gagged me.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of it. Because basically I don't. You know, you do your duty and mind your P's and Q's. You get used to death. It becomes part of your everyday life. But I think my regret, Mr. Howard, Glenn, hard for me to treat a important dignitary like you by first name. Anyway, my regret is I was not a Christian when I was in the Navy. I came through the Navy as brittle as glass, essentially incapable of emotion. That's not good. It certainly didn't help my first marriage or my relationships with my kids for many years. It wasn't until I stood at the battlefield at Gettysburg, read those plaques, visualized kids coming wave after wave, kids, just like the ones I was talking to, until they were using piled up bodies for barricades. And I began to cry. I didn't know why. And I realized, for God's sake, what kind of insanity are human beings doing to each other?
Yes.
The war was, for all practical purposes, over, and here we slaughtered 53,000 men in 3 days. Mm. What kind of sanity is that? Why are human beings doing anything like that? And it began to break my glaze, and I realized how very hard and warlike I had been. War's necessary. Jesus said it very plainly. You will have wars and rumors of wars, and we sure do. But I think the regrets I have that I didn't go through the war as a Christian, because I would have come out a much different person.
Your faith has been one of your great attributes in these
Yes, I
recent
became
years.
a Christian some years later, and it totally changed everything I do and the way I think and the way I live. So that, you wish you could go back and make up some of those years, but all you can do is make them up now. And I guess that's partly why I keep up now with any group that wants to hear the story of Pearl Harbor and the fact that they're not speaking Japanese or German, because Pearl Harbor was the turning point of the war, the turning point of my life, certainly, and the turning point of the country at that point.
Ed, you are an incredible senior, I'll tell you. Not only living 94 years, surviving the USS Oklahoma and Pearl Harbor, but a man who lives by yourself. You drive your car every place you want to go. You're active, out speaking to people, sharing not only your experiences, but also your faith. And it's very obvious your faith is so much a part of who you are.
Sure is.
We haven't had a chance to talk any about your family. How many kids do you have?
I had 7.
7 kids.
I buried 3 wives, 2 kids by the first wife and 5 by the second wife. She wanted more, and I said, hey, 7's the Lord's number of completeness. That's plenty for me.
There you go. 5 still remaining. We haven't talked about, I happen to know you were also involved in working in missions work, a lot of missions trips all over the world. That could be a whole show all by itself, but we've simply run out of time. Ed, I'm just hoping that your trip over to Pearl Harbor again this year, I think you said one of your sons is going to be joining you on this trip.
Yes.
I think that's going to be exciting. I am so delighted you're able to go back at the age of 94. You're still doing it. And in about 6 years from now, I want you to come on back in, and we want to do another show celebrating your 100th birthday.
Are you guaranteeing it?
I'm going to do my best for it. I'll tell you, I'm Glenn Howard, Senior World Radio. It's been a ball talking with Ed Vezey, survivor of the U.S. Oklahoma, 95-year-old survivor. He says he's not a hero, he's a survivor, and survive he has. Ed, thanks so much for coming in. We got to go. God bless you. Be sure and tune in again this same time next week. Until then, be kind to everybody you know. Do something good for somebody, especially for yourself. We'll see you this same time next week. Bye-bye now.
I'm on the top of the world looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find is the love